Welcome to Plastic Surgery Secrets Talk, the podcast where we go behind the scenes of everything interesting in plastic surgery and the aesthetics world. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Spiegel.
I'm Dr. Tower.
And I'm Dr. O'Neill from the Spiegel Center just outside of Boston. We are excited for season 3 to continue. It's November, and that means at the end of we just had not Thanksgiving. What am I talking about? We just had Halloween. And
Thanksgiving's
Thanksgiving is coming up. But the day after Thanksgiving
is even
a
bigger
really
holiday.
Important day. It's Black Friday. And what does that mean?
Well, we wear black all year, but on Black Friday, we, like everybody else, contribute to America by offering, I don't know, whatever they come up with, some sort of special, amazing deals that they never do the rest of the year because it doesn't make any sense. But that's what they do.
Right. And how did Black Friday come about? You always have a good story about that.
Well, Black Friday was the day when American retailers sold so many items that they finally switched from being in the red, losing money, to being in the black. That was the convert to profitability day for many stores. That's why they called it Black
crazy?
Friday.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and it's the month before the end of the year.
I know, right?
Well, at the rate our taxes are going, we'll be lucky if it happens Black Friday, or maybe we'll keep on going into Christmas.
IRS refers to Black Friday as April 15th. Black Friday is a different day for them. Anyway, so let's talk. Dr. O'Neill, go ahead.
So how did you feel leading up to your first solo surgery? I've never had that, of course, because I don't do surgery.
You did. You've
But I
done
did
many
have my
procedures.
first. Yeah. And I've had, the very first time I remember, and I'll share my story. The very first time holding the syringe by myself, Dr. Spiegel, you gave me a patient who the very next week was walking the Prada runway.
Red carpet. Yeah, not the red carpet, the one runway.
The Prada runway. That was my very first patient. Wow. She lives in Paris. She still comes every blue moon for a little fillers and Botox. That was more than 10 years ago. We still laugh about it. She did not know at that day that she was my very first one solo in front of her. But you said to me, "Oh, you're ready for this." And I was literally about to inject her where she goes, "I just want you to know I can't bruise because next week I'm walking the runway, the Prada show." And I looked at her and I was like,
You get no problem.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, but I guess I did all right because she flies in from Paris. So. What's your first story, Dr. Tower?
Honestly, I don't know if I remember my first solo surgery. It was probably something really uneventful, unremarkable. I do remember my first solo facelift. And the reason I remember it is because I was an attending at a hospital. And where we do all of our surgery now, it's in a private surgery center where all we do is facial plastics. But doing your first deep plane facelift in a hospital, you go in the morning and they ask you, "So what do you need for this surgery?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, this means that the staff here never does these. And I'm the only one who really knows what's going on here." So it's like getting on a flight from Boston to Paris and you're the pilot and all of your crew has no idea what they're doing. And you've got to tell them, okay, you got to
Where's Paris?
Use instruments, go that. You've got to tell them everything. So you're like basically leading the blind. And so it's a very different experience from working at the Spiegel Center where all the staff knows that's what they do day in, day out. And so
they brought you some stirrups, a gynecologic speculum, a colonoscope.
This is probably what you'll need, right?
Yeah.
Well, does that happen? I mean, that's kind of really interesting. I imagine... Does that happen a lot, like when you operate in a hospital?
It does actually, because we do a lot of facial feminization surgery at the Spiegel Center too, and I just did a procedure at one of the local hospitals, and it's kind of the same vibe. Like you've got to really get the team, like, okay, no, go open these instruments. These are the drill bits that I need. These are the rasps.
Other considerations that you don't have to think about.
They don't know. Yeah, usually it's on autopilot. Usually the crew, like they've already done all the setup and preparation, but when you're in a hospital, it's a much different vibe.
It's like cooking in someone else's kitchen, right?
Exactly.
You know how to make your breakfast at your kitchen really quickly, but you stop in someone else's house or your Airbnb and you're like, well, where do they keep the spoons?
But that is so fascinating because I don't think that occurs to a patient.
No, they would, they shouldn't.
Yeah,
they should be able to board the plane and get.
Sometimes they say I'd rather be at a hospital because they feel like it's going to be
it's
better. But where you operate the most, that's your
most
sweet spot.
I tell patients that all the time, but I don't know if they understand it on that level. But I'll say, like, one of the major advantages is this is all we do here. This facility is designed from the ground up to just do facial plastic surgery.
Yeah.
We have all the instrumentation, all the things that I need to do my best job. Things can be a little bit shakier in a hospital setting where the last person to do a facelift here was Dr. So-and-so in 1997. And you're like, okay.
Or 1967.
Things have probably changed a little bit since then. Yeah.
Let me just blow the dust off those instruments.
Yeah, they bring out Dr. So-and-so's old retractors, and you're like, wow. Yeah,
I saw that in a museum once.
Exactly.
That is so. I think that's fascinating because that's really behind the scenes. I don't think anyone thinks of that. I really don't.
Maybe this podcast is going to be censored now by saying that. American Hospital Association is going to block it.
Yeah, but that's really, really crazy. Wait, so Dr. Spiegel, do you even remember your first? Because yours was a little longer than Dr.
Well,
Powell's.
it was a different time, and when I was in training, I mean, the way training is, as I don't know if everyone listening knows, but the way training works is after college, you go to medical school, and after medical school, you do an internship, which is 1 year of surgery or something, and then you go into your residency, which ranges from 4 to 5 years of more specialty training, and then after that, you can do a fellowship, like in plastic surgery or facial plastic surgery or something else. And typically, the way it is nowadays, when you are a resident, you always have a supervisor with you at all times. But when I was training, it was not that way. And pretty much you did your internship, and towards the end of your internship, they started saying things like, you've seen this enough, go do it. Mm-hmm. And then in your
so see one, do one.
See one, do one, teach one is the saying. And then in my first year of head and neck surgery training, I recall my first rotation, first year, the residents pulling me aside and the attendings, which are the supervising staff, saying, okay, we get a lot of XYZ cases, and we're going to have you start them out because we're going to be busy doing things. So it'd be like broken jaw bones. And that's one of the reasons why I feel very familiar with jaw surgery and very comfortable with it, is because starting from a year and a half out of medical school, they would say, okay, here's a complex broken jaw. Take care of it. Call me at the end and I'll double check it. And that's the way things went.
Yeah. So I think that's something that's changed for better or for worse, but
better and worse.
You probably had a much more,
it goes.
It'd be a much more abrupt transition point. Whereas now I think it's like more transitional. So graduated experience and graduated.
That's right. Less sink or swim.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I'll tell you a story. This is a great one from training. I was a resident still. I was a third-year resident, so now I've done 3 years out of medical school, but I have 6 years total, so I'm right in the middle. And I went to a course. I was in San Francisco. I went to a course in New York City with Mark Erkin, who's a very famous head and neck plastic surgeon. And he was showing a flap called a transverse cervical artery flap or something like that. And it was this complicated thing, and he showed some slides about it. And then I came back to residency, and transverse cervical island flap, I think it was called. I came back to residency, and we're doing surgery. We're reconstructing someone's tongue, and we're getting ready to do the reconstructing part. And I'm the junior surgeon there. There's an attending, the boss. There's a chief resident who's in his last year, or fifth year, and he's now the chairman of one of the big programs in New York City. And me, and I was the 2.5 years out of medical school. And I said, I just got back from this course and I saw this lateral transverse cervical island flap. It was pretty cool looking. It might work in a case like this. And the attending surgeon looked at me and he said, oh yeah? Do it. And then he and the other guy left. And they said, we're going to get lunch. And they left. And they left me alone. And I had seen one on a slideshow. Wow. And we're now in a real person. And the other two guys took off. And then I did it. Now, those things sound awful to the person listening at home, but you have to trust that your mentors wouldn't put you in a situation where you would mess things up. And we never did. And you also, as the trainee and the surgeon, you had to be competent or responsible to know your competence and to say, gosh, I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. And so problems never developed. But that was a long time ago, and I will reassure everybody listening that certainly in any of our offices and practices, that just doesn't happen anymore, nothing like that. Well, so nowadays it's very different.
So
Yeah.
how did you celebrate your first one? I don't know if that's a question, but people
Well, I think you there's some
home
good
sleep.
stories of
Yeah,
that.
exactly. That was the first thought that came in.
You
mind.
exhale.
I probably went home, made a frozen pizza, and took a shower and passed out. That's probably what I did.
I know that sometimes when I've been working with residents in the past, I know a story of a trainee who did a complicated part of a surgery, and she was so happy that it was successful that as soon as it clicked into place, she stood up, kind of raised her hands in victory, and walked out of the OR. But the surgery wasn't done.
Dropped the mic
Oh,
and
she
left.
just
Yeah.
She was just like, "Oh my gosh, I did it!" and left. Like,
I'm
no,
out.
but it's not over.
It's only downhill from here.
I wasn't part of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once again, I will say that the people who come to the Spiegel Center to learn, they're really observers at this point. We're a different level of place. This is not a training center, so it's different. But everybody at some point or another goes off on their own. It's
I mean, that's a good point. And I think many of the best fellowship programs in the country are observerships. And you learn how to use your hands in residency. You learn how to use your brain a lot more in fellowship. And you learn how to analyze a patient, develop a plan, and trust that you already know how to use your hands when it's time to execute.
well, it's like the story I said of seeing something in a slideshow and then doing it. By the time you're in a fellowship program, you know how to do things, and you've just seen how someone else does it, and it clicks.
I stress to our graduating fellows, and I sometimes say this to the residents, which is when you're preparing for a big case, say it's their first big facelift or their rhinoplasty or something like that, you can rehearse the steps in your head many times. And I used to actually write out individual steps so that I could internalize it, and then I'm not thinking about things while I'm doing them. I've already done the rehearsal, and then you just can execute, because you're still using the same parts of your brain, whether you're practicing with your hands or you're practicing mentally.
Athletes do that. They visualize the game, they
Yeah.
visualize the shot, and then it
You
executes.
literally imagine yourself in the room doing all the maneuvers and saying what you're going to say and doing what you're going to do.
True. And from a safety point of view, people who go off and open up shop or start working somewhere, they've already graduated, meaning even though they're kind of green and don't have as much experience, they've met all competence requirements.
Well, it's like being a pilot.
Like being
Like
a pilot.
the pilot's done thousands of hours of
Yeah.
flight time before they're allowed to work for the commercial airlines.
Exactly the same.
It's the same thing with surgeons.
That's
So
right.
you've answered my next question, which is what would you say to your prior self, or what would you say to other surgeons? You kind of said, write it all out and then play it in your head right before. Any other words of the wise to your prior self or to others listening?
I'd say, go into podcasting. Less stressful, more fun. It's hard to drink a seltzer while you're operating.
Yeah, but you'll have nothing interesting to say.
Well, I'm
Unless
sure
you're talking about,
I think also just trust your training. I mean, we spend years and years of our lives to prepare for the first cut.
it's 13 years after high school.
And they talk about something called the imposter syndrome or something like that, which everybody probably in our field knows a little twinge of what that feels
Everyone
like.
does, yeah.
But as soon as you get over it, as soon as you're on the other side, you realize, oh gosh, that was like way easier. I don't know what I was so in my head about. Because you already know how to do it. And just trusting yourself is part of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And on the podcasting comment, I'm just going to say that, it's November, and I'm sure that almost everybody listening to this has already seen Nobody Wants This on Netflix about the two podcasting sisters. So, like I said, that's a really good career path, it seems.
Yeah, that's for sure. Or, what's her name? Alex Earl or something like that. She just, they're also like the Earl sisters are also.
I've got to watch it.
Oh, you know more than I do.
Don't give me too many. Yeah, don't give it away.
I spent too much time.
I won't tell you the secret.
So if you've liked what you've heard, contact us at drspiegel.com or call 617-566-3223. And for sure, check back our social media and everything this month for our Black Friday specials.
And tune in December for a holiday episode. And again, that's SPIEGEL, I before E except after C, and 617-566-3223. And that spells 566 FACE if you have an old-fashioned phone with letters on it.